Divine victory revealed, how 300 faithful soldiers led by Gideon transformed an entire army. In the days of the judges, the Israelites were oppressed by the Midianites for 7 long years. Their cries ascended to heaven, desperate for a deliverer. Among them was Gideon, the youngest son of Joash from the clan of Abiezer, whose heart echoed with self-doubt as he threshed wheat in a winepress, trembling in fear. As he struck the grain, a shadow fell upon him, and he turned to behold the angel of the Lord standing before him, declaring, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Gideon could scarcely believe his ears. "If the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us?" he lamented, his heart heavy with despair. He longed for tangible evidence of God's presence amid their suffering. In a moment of desperation, Gideon laid out a fleece, asking for a sign. "Let there be dew on the fleece alone, and let the ground be dry." The Lord answered, and when he rose the following morning, the fleece was wet, while the ground around remained parched. Yet Gideon was not finished. He pressed the Lord for another sign. "Do not be angry with me, but let me test just once more." He requested the opposite, dew on the ground, while the fleece remained dry. Once more the Lord obliged, and with each sign, Gideon's faith rekindled, igniting a fire of purpose within him. He gathered the men of Israel, their spirits lifted, ready to fight the Midianite horde. But the Lord spoke again, and his words struck fear within Gideon's heart. "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand." The Lord knew the pride that accompanies numbers. He instructed Gideon to proclaim to the fearful to return home. Gideon obeyed, and one by one thousands of soldiers turned away, until only 300 men remained. These were not warriors clad in armor, but faithful hearts willing to trust in the unseen power of God. The night cloaked them as they approached the Midianite camp, armed only with trumpets and jars, their power resting solely in the hands of the Almighty. Gideon divided his men into 3 companies and whispered words of strength into the quivering air. Each heart pounded in anxious anticipation as they awaited the command. At the midnight hour they blew their trumpets and shattered their jars, the sound echoing like thunder through the valley. Chaos erupted in the enemy camp. The Midianites awoke, startled and confused, believing they were surrounded by a great army. In the shadows of the night, what was meant to be a victory became their downfall, as they turned their swords upon one another in terror. Witnessing such a divine victory, Gideon and his 300 men stood in awe, transformed by the overwhelming revelation of God's power. Yet, even in triumph, Gideon's heart turned inward, contemplating whether he had satisfied his calling. He felt the weight of the journey still ahead of them, the trials that awaited the remnant that had marched in faith. Would they remain steadfast in their quest for guidance and wisdom from the Lord? The darkness loomed, teasing uncertainties about the path that stretched before them. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. In the aftermath of the battle's deafening silence, Gideon and his men were left with burning questions. The journey was just beginning, and under the shadows of uncertain outcomes, they sought to hear from the Lord. The question lingered in their hearts. What other tests of faith awaited those trusting in the sovereign hand of God? And with a deep breath, they stepped forward, ready to witness his unfolding design, waiting for revelation in the night. As dawn broke over the vanquished Midianite camp, the air was thick with the remnants of fear and confusion. Gideon gazed upon the scene, his spirit both lifted and burdened. The Lord had granted them a miraculous victory, yet the remnants of battle lay scattered like broken promises. His heart was stirred by the magnitude of their deliverance, but questions loomed. Who would take responsibility for the evacuation of their oppressors? With the rising sun, Gideon rallied his warriors, their hearts emboldened yet still grappling with uncertainty. "Brothers," he called, "let us pursue the Midianites. Let not a single one escape their recompense, for the Lord has delivered them into our hands." His voice, once timid, now rang with the confidence born of divine conviction. The men cheered, their spirits unified by the glory of their victory and the desire for justice. They set forth, imbued with the strength of their faith, crossing the river Jordan in pursuit of their enemies. As they advanced, Gideon sent messengers throughout the hills of Ephraim, urging the men of that tribe to come and join their quest. "Come down against the Midianites, for the Lord has delivered your enemies into your hands." And the men of Ephraim responded with eagerness, rushing to the rescue with swords unsheathed and voices echoing through the valleys. Yet where there was victory there also lingered bitterness. The Ephraimites confronted Gideon in indignation. "Why have you treated us this way? Why did you not call us when you went to fight the Midianites?" Their hearts were heavy with the feeling of exclusion, a storm of jealousy and pride brewing in their midst. Gideon, wise and humble, responded not with wrath but with grace. "What have I now done in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? The Lord has delivered into your hands the leaders of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you?" His gentle answer soothed their spirits, and his words calmed the winds of contention. The pursuit continued, and as Gideon pressed into the territory of the Midianites, he felt the fatigue of his men begin to weigh heavily upon them. Their strength waned, and hunger gnawed at their bellies. They reached Succoth, seeking bread for their weary soldiers. Yet the princes of Succoth turned them away, mockingly questioning Gideon's authority. "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army?" Fearing the wrath of the Midianites, they chose to deny help to God's chosen deliverer. Anger flared within Gideon, but he turned it into resolve. "When the Lord delivers Zebah and Zalmunna to my hand, I will flail your flesh with thorns of the wilderness and with briars." He moved on, unwavering in his mission, understanding that the Lord's power would be made manifest through him. Not far from there they reached Peniel, yet there Gideon faced the same reproach. The men of Peniel offered no assistance, their hearts gripped by fear. The Lord had placed Gideon upon a path of testing not only for himself but for all of Israel. As Gideon forged onward with the dwindling handful of warriors, he remembered the signs that had bolstered his faith. He whispered prayers, drawing strength from the God who had orchestrated his every step. He pressed deeper into enemy territory, unyielding, knowing the time for final confrontation drew near. In the valley, amid the echoes of defeat, there awaited an unshakable truth known only to those who loyally followed the Lord. Gideon would soon witness the fulfillment of promises spoken long ago, hidden plans set forth by God's divine will. Yet within the heart of this unfolding saga lay the mystery of God's sovereign design. How would the completion of this battle shape the destiny of Israel? What awaited them beyond the horizon? Gideon and his band would soon discover that this victory was but a prelude to the greater plans the Lord had woven into the fabric of their lives. As the sun climbed higher in the firmament, casting golden rays upon the land, Gideon and his small band of warriors advanced with resolute hearts. They tread through the valleys, focusing on the tracks of the Midianites, whose flight had left a wake of despair and chaos. Even with their spirits bolstered by the previous victory, the burdens of fatigue and hunger pressed heavily upon them, yet the hope of divine intervention propelled them forward. Arriving at a ridge overlooking the encampment of Zebah and Zalmunna, Gideon took a moment to survey their forces. Armed with mere torches and their unyielding faith, the remnant army of Israel stood at a threshold, the point of no return. Here, amid the tension of anticipation, Gideon called upon the Lord, seeking his guidance. "Lord Almighty," he prayed fervently, "may your will be done. Grant us the strength to deliver our people from their oppressors. Let not my men fall prey to despair." The stillness of the moment was abruptly broken as an unknown man approached, clothed in the garb of a Midianite. His eyes, wide with terror, struck Gideon with confusion. The Lord intervened, providing Gideon insight to discern that this man had escaped the fray, bringing a message of dismay from his own camp. "My Lord," he stammered, "I have heard a tale, a vision among the Midianites.
a loaf of barley bread rolling into the camp, struck the tent with such force it fell, and all was laid waste. Gideon's heart quickened at the symbolism of the man's words, as they alluded to the impending victory promised by God. "Indeed, God has delivered them into our hands," he declared, his voice filled with renewed conviction.
In exuberance, Gideon shared this vision with his men. "Arise, for the Lord has turned the hearts of our enemies against one another. Let us prepare our torches, our trumpets. Let us go as the Lord commands." Their weary faces brightened, and no longer did they feel the weight of exhaustion, for they were energized by the promise of the Lord's deliverance. Descending into the Midianite camp under the cloak of night, they aligned their ranks, each man holding a torch within an earthen vessel, ready to strike. As they approached, Gideon gave the signal, and together they blew their trumpets. Their shouts echoed through the valley, a deafening sound declaring the glory of the Lord. "Let the sword of the Lord and of Gideon," they cried, a battle cry that resonated in the hearts of the warriors and thrummed in the air like a resounding promise. The Midianite army awoke from their slumber, fear gripping their hearts as they beheld the multitude of torches, believing their encampment was overrun by a great army. Confusion swept through the ranks, and in the chaos, sword turned against sword, each man fleeing in terror from his brother. In that very moment, Gideon saw the manifestation of the power of God, how he had woven their faith with his might. The battle was not waged by sword and spear, but through trust in the Almighty. And as the Midianite forces collapsed into disarray, Gideon knew the Lord's purpose was unfolding before them, a testament to his everlasting faithfulness and unchanging nature. Yet as the echoes of victory rang high, a question lingered. Gideon sensed that this triumph was not merely for freedom from tyranny, but a pivotal moment in the story of Israel, a prologue to a greater revelation that awaited those who would faithfully pursue the heart of God. What would be the legacy of this deliverance? How would this mighty act shape the future of his chosen people? With the dawn yet to break fully, Gideon embraced the anticipation of what would come next, acknowledging that the hand of God was at work, crafting an eternal narrative that intricately tied the present moment to the promises of ages past, awaiting fulfillment in the heart of a nation. As dawn's gentle light began to crest over the horizon, illuminating the remnants of the Midianite camp, the stillness that followed the tumult of the night bore witness to the miraculous power of the Lord. The once formidable army, now scattered like leaves in the wind, lay defeated, their fiercest warriors overtaken by fear and confusion. Gideon and his men, emboldened by their faith and the divine promise they had clung to, stepped forth amidst the quiet ruins. Gideon lifted his eyes towards the heavens, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Great is thy faithfulness, O God," he proclaimed, for the Lord had done as he promised. The earth beneath their feet was soaked with the remnants of combat, a grim reminder of the gravity of the victory won. Yet, imbued by hope, the men of Israel marveled at how their trust in God was met with his unyielding strength. Then Gideon spied the fleeing remnants of Zebah and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian. With an urgency born from zeal and divine conviction, he called his men to pursue. "Gather your strength. We must not let the leaders escape, for the Lord has delivered our enemies into our grasp. How can we rest while they roam free?" The words ignited a fervor within the hearts of the weary soldiers. Pursuing their enemies across the plains and through the hills, they pressed on, relentless and resolute. Their shouts proclaimed not merely their own intentions, but the glory of the one who sent them forth, the God of Israel. As they traveled, Gideon sought counsel from the Lord. He reminded God of his covenant with their forefathers, asking for divine clarity on how best to bring the kings to justice. And in those hushed moments of prayer, the Lord's voice was clear, reassuring, and faithful. "You shall not falter, I shall go before you. Victory shall be achieved not by might, but through obedience to my word." Days turned into nights and the chase continued, yet resources dwindled and exhaustion set in. Gideon and his men ventured into the territory of Succoth, seeking sustenance for the weary. "Give us food," he pleaded to the leaders of the town, "for we are pursuing the kings of Midian. Our valor is wrought by the hand of God." But the leaders of Succoth scoffed at Gideon. Are the hands of Zeba and Zalmunna already in your grasp that we should risk our men and provisions? Who are you, that we should trust in your God?" Their words stung, igniting a fire within Gideon that was fueled by the certainty of God's promise. "I shall return," Gideon declared, his voice firm with resolve. "When the Lord delivers your enemies into my hand, I will return, and I will discipline you for your lack of faith." Gideon pressed on, for the memory of glory firmly anchored his heart. As they traversed barren lands filled with thorns and thistles, the image of the terror-stricken Midianites haunted their thoughts. They remained vigilant, understanding that the testament of their faith would echo through the ages. And in that season of pursuit, it was revealed to Gideon that this struggle was not solely for personal vengeance, but rather part of a greater divine tapestry woven through time. The fate of a nation hung in the balance, the destiny of Israel intertwined with the promises God had spoken through the prophets. The chase was nearing its climactic close, and with every victory that lay ahead, Gideon sensed that not only would the kings meet their end, but the true essence of what God was orchestrating over generations was about to unfold, an intricate play of redemption locked in divine providence. What awaited them at the final confrontation, and how would the concluding chapter of their journey reveal the depth of God's eternal plan? The air crackled with divine expectation as they drew near to the end of their pursuit. As Gideon and his men trudged deeper into the wilderness, a weariness that was more than physical began to settle upon them. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, mirroring the testing of their faith. Yet Gideon's spirit remained unyielded. "Let us neither falter nor fear, for the Lord goes with us," he rallied. Encouraged by their leader's conviction, the soldiers gained renewed strength, the echoes of their collective resolve ringing in the air. Knowing they were nearing the edge of Midianite territory, Gideon pressed on, his heart alive with divine purpose. Each step reminded him of the covenant God had made with Abraham and Isaac, promises that spanned generations, promises that were now woven into their very mission. Just as the Lord had delivered his people from bondage in Egypt, he would again act with great might. As they approached the well of Harod, the refreshing waters called to them like a whispered promise of revival. Gideon, however, knew that this moment was sacred, and instead, he sought the Lord in prayer. "O Lord, grant us favor as we draw close to our enemies. You have commanded us, and we shall stand firm," he declared into the silence, his heart standing as a beacon of faith. But even as he prayed, a heavy shadow loomed over them. Zeba and Zalmunna had gathered their forces. The kings, having rallied what remained of their armies, were prepared for a counterattack, their hatred twisted and potent. Gideon drew together his men, the urgency palpable. "The enemy is near. Gather your resolve and prepare your weapons, for God shall bring them low." Night fell, ushering in a cloak of darkness that concealed both Gideon's forces and his enemies. He gathered around him the men who had remained faithful through trials unseen. "The Lord has called us to this hour. He shall reveal his hand upon our foes." The men, with hearts aflame, listened intently, their spirits elevated by the anticipation of divine intervention. As the hour drew late, Gideon discerned that the pivotal moment was at hand. "Be vigilant, for the Lord commands us to act," he instructed. He divided his small band into 2 companies, equipping them not with swords, but with trumpets and torches hidden in earthen jars, a symbol of the power of God's work through humble means. "When I blow the trumpet, follow my lead and cry out, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" The night was thick, but the moment was clear. Each heartbeat seemed synchronized with the mighty breath of God. As they approached the camp, Gideon whispered a fervent prayer, asking for courage and clarity. From the shadow, he caught the shimmer of the Midianite campfires, flickering like small stars against the black of night. Precarious, vulnerable, with a mighty roar, Gideon blew the trumpet, the sound piercing the stillness of the night. In unison, the men cried out, "For the Lord and for Gideon." The sound reverberated like thunder, echoing with divine authority. The torches erupted into brilliance as the jars shattered on the rocky ground. Confusion struck the Midianite soldiers, chaos erupting amidst their ranks. God stirred in that moment, causing fear to rise within them. "Die, flee, let us kill our pursuers," they cried out, turning their swords upon one another. Gideon watched, a rush of holy awe filling his heart. The Almighty was indeed fighting for them, and what seemed impossible was occurring before their very eyes. Victory was not merely a goal. It was a testimony to the faithfulness of God, a declaration that His purpose would be fulfilled through those who trust in Him. As dawn broke, Gideon marveled at the sight of the defeated Midianite army. Yet, even as they rejoiced, Gideon felt within his spirit a stirring recognition that this triumph was merely one step toward the unfolding of God's sovereign plan, a reminder that a greater story of redemption was in the making. And in the midst of victory, the haunting question remained: what was the true depth of God's purpose in their deliverance? As the sun lifted fully upon the horizon, Gideon felt the weight of a promise yet to be revealed, a promise that would ripple through the ages. As dawn bathed the land in golden light, Gideon stood amongst his weary yet jubilant men, hearts still pounding from the excitement of their miraculous victory. The remnants of the Midianite camp lay scattered, a testament of God's divine intervention. Yet, amidst the elation, a heavy mantle of purpose rested upon Gideon's shoulders. "Brothers, we have witnessed the hand of God move among us," Gideon proclaimed, eyes gleaming with fervor. "This victory is not merely for our deliverance, but for the glory of God's name, that all may know He redeems His people and keeps His covenant. Let us gather the spoils, not by our might but by His decree." The soldiers eagerly collected the treasures left behind, gold, jewels, and livestock, items meant for the idols of Midian, but now becoming an offering to the Lord. They did not act in greed, but in reverence, aware that these spoils would bear witness of their God to future generations. As they returned to their homeland, the joyous songs of praise erupted from their throats, echoing the psalms of David yet to come. "Blessed be the Lord, for He has done great things. His faithfulness endures forever," they sang, the sound filling valleys and reaching cities, rekindling hope among those subjugated under fear. But as the celebration breathed life into their spirits, Gideon's heart weighed with promise, a recognition that their deliverance hinged on a greater purpose. He found himself wandering to a solitary place, seeking the Lord in a deepening well of prayer. "O Lord, great are your works, but what do you desire of us now?" he cried, the echoes of his question mingling with the morning wind. In that sacred moment of encounter, silence enveloped him. Suddenly a whisper stirred his heart, and he understood. The victory over the Midianites was but a prelude to a deeper revelation. God was about to unveil His plan, one that would not only redeem Israel but also weave His people into the fabric of His eternal story. Returning to his men, Gideon raised his voice once more, his heart ablaze. "Brothers, today marks the beginning of a new chapter. The Lord has granted us victory, but the path of obedience lies ahead of us. We are to return to Him, to tear down the altars of Baal, and to lead this nation back into covenant with the One who fights for us." The men, ignited by his words, responded with fervor. "We shall follow you, Gideon. We will serve the Lord our God." Their resolve solidified, spirits joined, as they prepared to take the sacred fight against the idols that corrupt and lead the people astray. Days turned into weeks as they journeyed from village to village, proclaiming the wonders of God and uplifting the name of Yahweh. Yet, in the heart of Gideon, a longing grew, a desire for the people to fully embrace their God once again. As they rebuilt altars, a fire of devotion ignited among the tribes. It was as if every stone they placed represented a heart turned back to the Lord. But as they pressed forward against idolatry and evil, dark whispers met them from beyond their borders, news from strange lands that spoke of a rising threat, not of Midian, but from a northern king whose shadow loomed ominously. Gideon sensed that the battle was far from over. God's purpose within this deliverance required more. And as the people of Israel cried out for guidance, the question loomed ever larger in Gideon's heart. What truly awaited them in this divine unfolding? What greater purpose did God have in store, now that His story had started to take shape? For unbidden in the quiet of his prayers, he felt the stirrings of destiny yet unrealized, a narrative of faithfulness and covenant echoing through the ages. And in that silence, he sensed it. Something grander was about to unfold. A sign of God's sovereignty that would transcend their understanding, marking them forever within the annals of his salvation history. As the light of the afternoon sun began to fade, casting long shadows over the land, Gideon gathered his men once more. The weight of their task pressed heavily upon him. He knew that the road ahead would not simply be one of triumphant victory, but also of enduring faithfulness. "Brothers," he began, his voice steady yet filled with urgency, "the Lord has called us into deeper waters than we have waded before. We have torn down the altars of Baal, but behold, the forces of darkness linger still. A greater adversary stirs in the shadows, a king who seeks to deny us our covenant with Yahweh. We must be resolute in our faith." At these words a murmur rippled through the ranks, a mingling of fear and determination visible upon the faces of those who stood before him. They were as the wheat ready for harvest, eager to yield fruit for the glory of God, yet aware that the harvest required toil and conflict. "The Lord has commanded us to be strong and courageous," Gideon declared. "Let us offer our lives as living sacrifices before him, for he shall prepare our way." Motivated, the men rallied around their leader, their resolve hardening like iron. "We are prepared to follow you, Gideon, to face whatever comes upon us," they shouted in unison, their voices lifted high, echoing against the hills. Days turned to nights as they trained and prayed, seeking guidance from the Almighty. Under the mantle of dusk, Gideon sought the Lord fervently, wrestling in the spirit with what lay ahead. The experiences of the past had forged a foundation of faith among Gideon and his people, yet uncertainty gripped him. "O Lord, confirm your leading," he cried. "Grant us signs of assurance that we might not falter." In the stillness the voice of God pierced through the quiet. "You shall not fear nor be dismayed, for I am with you. Just as I delivered you from Midian, so shall I deliver you from the hand of your greater foe." A surge of courage rose within Gideon's heart. It was on that very night that God revealed a stratagem to his servant. "Divide your men into companies of 100, he instructed. "Each shall carry a trumpet and a vessel, and at the appointed moment they shall shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" Awed by such an unusual command, Gideon felt the weight of divine wisdom. Moreover, it was not their strength nor their numbers that God sought to display, but the power of his might against the arrogance of men. With renewed determination, he conveyed the divine strategy to his men. "We go not in strength but with the power of our God who will fight for us." As dawn broke over the horizon, the valleys reverberated with the sound of trumpets blaring, and the shattering of lamps echoed through the hills. Confusion swept through the enemy camp, as the sound swelled like a vast, consuming fire. In that moment, God moved with an unseen hand, orchestrating chaos among the Midianites. "Let us proclaim the holy name of the Lord," Gideon cried, and from every mouth arose a glorious directive, piercing the darkness and driving back the foes who sought their destruction. The enemy turned upon one another, the confusion exacting a toll beyond measure. As the clamor of despair filled the air, Gideon and his men rejoiced in the divine intervention they witnessed. "Truly the Lord has gone out before us," they shouted, their hearts intimate with the knowledge that his plans were unfolding. Yet even as victory reverberated through their hearts, an abiding question lingered within Gideon's spirit. What awaited them once the dust settled? What greater purpose did God intend to weave from their struggle against the forces of evil? For in the unfolding tales of their days, Gideon sensed a greater narrative emerging, a divine revelation poised to shape not only their destiny, but that of all Israel. With clenched fists raised in surrender to God's will, he prepared to face whatever followed, trusting that the Lord would guide his people into covenantal promises revealed from the beginning. And so it came to pass that the men of Israel stood victorious, their voices echoing upon the mountaintops, filled with the confidence of divine favor. With the remnants of the Midianite army fleeing before them, Gideon felt the breath of the Almighty surging through his people. Yet he could not escape the weight of the unfolding journey, for the shadow of the unknown still loomed. As the sun began its ascent anew, Gideon called his men to gather. "Brothers, though our enemies are scattered, the battle is not yet finished," he spoke, his words infused with the urgency of their collective destiny. "We must pursue those who have fled, for our hearts are aflame with the zeal of the Lord, and our hands have been strengthened in him." Thus they set forth on their pursuit, following the trail left by the Midianites in their haste. The land, once filled with despair, now blossomed with the promise of redemption. Yet with every step they took, Gideon prayed fervently, "O Lord, may each footfall be guided by your wisdom. May our hearts remain steadfast in faith, for the enemy may still possess the strength to rise against us." As they marched, Gideon's mind recalled the stories of old, when Joshua led the people into the promised land, the clouds of uncertainty parting only before the dread of the Lord. "Let us not grow weary," he encouraged his men. "Just as the Lord instructed Joshua, we too will pursue our enemies until the last remnants are gone." And in their pursuit, as they reached the territory of Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian, Gideon resolved in his spirit, "By the grace of God, we shall confront these foes, for the Lord has commanded our victory." No longer would the cycle of oppression reign over Israel, for their hearts now beat with newfound courage. But in the distance Gideon perceived another challenge. A host of Ephraimite men had gathered, frustrated that they had not been called to join the initial battle against Midian. "What is this that you have done?" they demanded, their voices tinged with indignation. "Why did you not summon us to fight alongside you?" Gideon, wise beyond his years, tempered his response with humility. "What have I done in comparison to the blessings you have received?" he asked, his tone gentle yet firm. "Is not the gleaning of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? The Lord has granted you a great victory over the kings of Midian. How can I compare my efforts with your triumph?" With his words, the ire of the Ephraimites began to calm. They remembered their own victories and the valor of Gideon, recognizing the thread of God's providence weaving them together in good. The pursuit resumed, and as the dawn surrendered to the brightness of midday, the men captured Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian, bringing them before Gideon. He stood before them, righteous anger mixed with divine purpose. "You sought to lead my people into bondage to turn us from the path of our God." With a single command, justice was rendered, culminating their fervent quest. The defeat of Midian sent ripples through every tribe of Israel, instilling in them a renewed sense of identity and covenant with Yahweh. Yet as Gideon looked upon the remnants of what once sought to destroy them, a whisper in his spirit stirred, calling him to reflect upon the true essence of their victory. Was this but a battle won, or the inception of a greater divine orchestration? In that moment of contemplation, he sensed something profound awakening within his soul, a revelation that echoed the promise of the Lord. Even amidst their triumph, shadows lingered, hinting at trials yet to unfold. And so, with reverent hearts, the Israelites gave praise to the Lord for his salvation. But in the recesses of his heart, Gideon knew this was but a chapter in a grander narrative, one filled with divine uncertainty and expectation, revealing that God's plan was far from complete. For as surely as David would one day rise from humble beginnings, so too would a greater deliverance emerge from these humble soldiers' victories. What lay ahead, none could fully grasp. But the promise of God loomed like the dawn, full of anticipation and holy intrigue. And it came to pass after the victory over the Midianites, that Gideon, now burdened with the weight of his people's future, sought the Lord in prayer, longing for understanding of what was to unfold. He gathered the leaders of Israel before him, their faces lit with joy, but within him stirred a tempest of concern. "Brothers," he began, "the Lord has brought us deliverance, yet his plans reach beyond our sight. We must seek his counsel once more, for the peace we feel may be but a fleeting breath if we do not remain vigilant." The men nodded, their hearts attuned to their leader's fervor, for they knew that even the mightiest victories required continued supplication before the Almighty. They encamped at a sacred place, calling upon the name of the Lord, promising to dedicate their lives to his service. As Gideon prayed, the Spirit of God enveloped him. "Gideon," a voice resonated, rich with authority yet tender as a promise. "You have walked in obedience, and I have delivered you from the hand of Midian. Yet, A test of the heart remains. The children of Israel must choose between faithfulness or reverting to disobedience, for their covenant with me is at stake. A chill ran through Gideon at the Lord's words, and as dawn came, he called for a gathering of all Israel. Hear me, O people of God. The Lord has indeed delivered us, but I sense within my spirit a challenge yet to come. The path before us is not one of ease, but of commitment to our covenant. From the crowd emerged the elders of the tribes of Gad and Reuben. What shall we do, Gideon? They pleaded, their eyes searching for guidance and strength. How do we ensure that the Midianites do not return to oppress us? Gideon spoke. Out of this victory must arise a new commitment. We shall sanctify ourselves before our God, offering him our hearts in contrition and worship. We must not forget the lessons of our forefathers, who turned from God and found themselves in chains. Thus they established a covenant with the Lord at a site sacred and revered, laying stones as a reminder of their promise. Each tribe brought forth an animal for sacrifice to honor the one who had delivered them. The air was filled with the scent of offerings rising as a sweet aroma to the heavens. Yet even as the Israelites consecrated themselves, Gideon's spirit remained restless. In the depths of his heart, he felt the unseen hand of the Lord moving, and he knew the struggle was not completely quelled. For the Lord sends a challenge, he declared, his voice firm. A challenge that will test the depths of our faith and loyalty. In that hour a shadow fell upon the gathering, and there among them was a young prophet bearing a word from the Lord. Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I have chosen you as a kingdom of priests, but beware. Your faith will be tested. Remain faithful, for I shall scatter those who turn from my ways, yet I will guide and protect those who seek me. The words of the prophet echoed like thunder across the valley, instilling awe and reverence among the people. The hearts of Israel trembled, convicted of the mighty call to holiness and vigilance. Gideon, emboldened by divine revelation, declared, Then let us prepare ourselves. Call together the tribes, every man, woman, and child. We shall gather as one to reaffirm our covenant and be ready for whatever comes, for the Lord our God is with us. Thus the people rallied, ignited with the fire of renewed commitment, their hearts beating as one. And as they prepared for the trials that lay ahead, Gideon pondered deeply on what God had yet to unveil. As the sound of their voices rose in unison, proclaiming the faithfulness of the God who never forsakes his own, Gideon sensed that the tapestry of redemptive history was about to unfurl even more. For though they stood united in purpose, unknown to them, a storm of faith and doubt would soon assail them, revealing the depths of their devotion. For such was the unfolding of God's sovereign plan, a plan not merely of deliverance but of revelation, where trials would not only define their faith but solidify their legacy. The road lit by the fire of divine promise assured them. Victory and struggle were intertwined, as the Lord's purposes would be revealed in mighty ways yet unseen. As the sun rose upon a new dawn, casting its golden rays over the encampment of Israel, Gideon gathered the people once more. His heart was filled not only with gratitude for the recent victory, but with an unwavering conviction to lead his people into a covenant relationship with the Lord. The air was thick with anticipation, for the promise of God was alive, and the stirring of his spirit was palpable among them. People of God, Gideon called, raising his arms in the light of day. The Lord has delivered our enemies into our hands, and we have witnessed his great faithfulness. Yet with deliverance comes the responsibility to remain faithful. Now is not the time to grow slack in our commitment, for we stand on the brink of a new beginning. A hush fell over the crowd, eyes fixed on their leader, their hearts ready for the guidance of the Almighty. Through him they had experienced fear dispelled by faith. Their lives were forever intertwined in a story of divine purpose, and they longed to know the fullness of that purpose. Gideon sensed this desire, renewing his resolve to fulfill the mission God had entrusted to him. He continued, We must tear down every altar that stands against our covenant with Yahweh. No more shall we bow to false gods, for we are a people called to worship the one true God. Let us gather and prepare ourselves to restore the holy altars of our land. The response was immediate. Shouts of agreement erupted, echoing through the valleys. We will follow you, Gideon. We will serve the Lord our God. Their united voices rose like a beacon, filled with resolution, an anthem of their newfound purpose. Yet even amidst their fervor, Gideon felt the weight of the task ahead. His thoughts returned to the future of Israel and the potential storms that lurked beyond the horizon. As we go forth, let us remain steadfast in prayer, Gideon urged. The challenges we face may require our utmost courage, for the Lord has declared that fidelity to him will be tested. The people nodded in solemn understanding, sensing the truth in his words. Together they arose, seeking God's direction in prayer and fasting, laying bare their hearts before him. In the stillness, they called upon his name, acknowledging their need for his guidance in the days yet to unfold. As they prayed, a profound peace enveloped them, a reassurance that could only come from the Lord. Gideon stood among them, witnessing transformation take root within their hearts. The cry for freedom had ignited a flame, and now the spirit of devotion surged through the ranks. Their resolve was strengthened, for they had tasted the sweetness of God's deliverance. Days passed, and the Israelites journeyed from tribe to tribe, tearing down the altars of Baal and Asherah, replacing idolatry with a commitment to worship the Almighty. Each stone they cast aside signified the historic shift within their culture, a tangible declaration of faithfulness in the face of evil. Yet amid their victory, murmurs of discontent began to arise. A challenge had emerged from within. Disbelief and doubt threatened to rise along with the prosperity they had begun to experience. Gideon felt the burden of leadership weigh heavier upon him, grappling with the reality that true faith required persistent vigilance. In those quiet moments of torment, Gideon called once again upon the Lord, praying for wisdom to combat the temptations that loomed. O God, strengthen our hearts, guide us in unity, that we may not falter in darkness but shine as beacons of your light. Then the Lord answered, Do not fear, I shall lead you into deeper waters, revealing the fullness of my plan. But remember, my people must choose faithfulness or a return to bondage. Lead them with grace. With renewed purpose coursing through him, Gideon turned back to the people, gathering them once again. The Lord is calling us into a deeper walk with him, he declared. We have experienced his mighty hand, but we must not forget the choices that lie before us. We must stand resolute against the snares of the enemy. The message pierced their hearts, igniting a fervent passion for holiness. No longer content with the past, they began to see the vision of a united and faithful Israel, a people drawn together under the banner of the Almighty, prepared to face the challenges ahead. As weeks turned into months, peace reigned in the lands once shaken by oppression. But still the vigilance remained, and whispers of a rising threat from the east reached them, an army gathering, intent on domination. Gideon stood resolute in the face of this impending challenge, affirming that the strength of their covenant with God would sustain them. Returning to prayer, Gideon sought wisdom with heavy-hearted supplication. O Lord, show us the way. Prepare our hearts and strengthen our hands for what is to come. We rely on your might. In that sacred moment, God laid upon Gideon's heart a strategy, a divine design for the coming trials. My people shall not be conquered. They will be instruments of my peace and justice. For as you have witnessed my power, so shall I reveal my hand among you again. Encouraged by this revelation, Gideon rallied his people, instilling in them the confidence of God's promise. The Lord is our banner. We shall not stand alone. Our faith shall lead us into battle. Gideon felt the weight of history upon him, recognizing the monumental significance of their journey. He understood that their collective obedience would shape not only their generation, but countless others to come. The tapestry of God's providence was unfurling, a legacy of faith, resilience, and divine victory woven through time. As preparations began for the challenges that lay ahead, Gideon looked upon his people with gratitude and strength renewed. The Lord had been with them, guiding their every step, and now they were poised to face whatever came their way, with God at the helm. Such was the unfolding of God's glory, a testimony forever etched in the chronicles of Israel, reminiscent of a greater truth that across the ages would echo, that true deliverance lies not only in victory, but in the hearts and lives dedicated to the author of faith. Thus Gideon reflected on the journey thus far, realigning his focus upon the Lord and his perfect will, for he knew the greatest battles were yet to come. But in the light of that understanding, one truth remained. The God whom they served was the same yesterday, today, and forever. He would continue to lead and gather his people into the fold of covenant faithfulness, and with that assurance Gideon raised his voice in prayer. Lord, may your will be done in us. We commit our ways to you, trusting in your unfailing love. Let your glory shine through our lives, that all may know you as the true and living God. As his cry faded into the morning light, a collective shout arose among the Israelites, united in purpose and strengthened by the resolve to walk boldly into the promises yet fulfilled. They were changed, a people transformed by faith, ready to stand against any challenge that lay before them. As they marched onward, remember this: no matter the trials we face upon our own journey, recognize that God's promises hold the power to guide us through the storm. Lift your hearts to him, and let his light illuminate your path. This is the moment. Stay connected to God's Word. You need to subscribe now to witness more of these powerful biblical stories that enrich your faith. Be sure to leave a like now to help spread God's truth across the earth through the algorithm. And don't miss sharing your spiritual reflections in the comments. How have these accounts impacted your own faith journey? Lastly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's unchanging truth. Join in this mission of faith. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Don't wait even one more second. Let's spread the love of Christ together.